Welcome to Deep Thought. Keeping the ego in check is tough. I'm going to tell you what. I was talking about a new battle within always emerging in the previous podcast. I'm going to tell you the biggest battle is that ego. And that's not, and see, the thing about the ego isn't a demon. I wouldn't never characterize it as a demon. Because let's be clear about the ego. Every single one of us need it. Because the purpose of the ego is to protect us. It's really a defense mechanism. It's there to protect the spirit. So it's not a bad thing. It's just a tool that every single person needs. You need to have an ego. Because if you don't have an ego, you're going to have a trouble going through life. Anybody say they don't have an ego, I'm going to tell them straight up, they either lying or they don't know the true purpose of it. Because they got one. Now, if they say they don't have an ego, you know what? I would say, look, I'll explain to them. I say, well, you know what? You probably, if you really don't have one, you have one, but you know how to keep it in balance. And I salute you. But here's the issue with that. Man, that thing's hard to keep in balance. Let's just be real. Because the ego says, hey, you know what? I can do this crazy act. The ego says, yeah, I can get that attractive mate. Yeah, the ego says, oh, yeah, I can take a chance and make this business go. You know, I can do some stuff because you know what? I'm the bomb, because that's what the ego is. The ego is I. And that's how it's supposed to be, really. Ain't nothing wrong with that. But you can't let that ego get out of control. Because if it get out of control and you so then you have trouble dealing with other people. Because ultimately, I don't care who you are, going through life, you got to interact with other people. It's very, 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 very few people who can go through life and they don't have to interact with somebody else at some point. And if that ego's out of control, you might not do it from a good place because it's all about you. You're not looking at the other side of the equation. And the thing is, it's tough. It's tough. Like, I'm going to tell you, especially tough part. When stuff happens that bruises your ego, that's really tough. You know, that is really tough because, you know, your ego is saying you the bomb, but then something happens that's blatant that shows, oh, wait, you ain't all that. Or at least gives you the impression you ain't all that. If you follow your ego, you still all that. And ultimately, you need to think you're all that. But, you know, because sometimes with the ego, it can be inflated to a false level. Because, see, the ego is not about always dealing with reality. The ego is there to protect you, even if they got to lie to you. That's that false ego. So keeping that in check, shoot, that can be a problem. Especially when we live in a culture where it's me, me, me. It really is. The culture overall is me, me, me. Do what you got to do. Don't worry about who else at work. It hurts. So it's tough. Now, it's tough, and especially tough when something happens to hurt that ego. Because your ego say, hey, this is how it should be. This is I should be in this position. But then something happens, and reality don't match what your ego is telling you. So it's tough. It's tough. And, you know, the only answer is balance. Now, it ain't necessarily mean you got to walk around and act all humble. Because, see, here's the problem with that. You're acting. If your ego's out of control, your ego is saying you the bomb. Yeah, you could try to act like, oh, well, you know, I'm just a humble person. But it's not truth. See, the thing is, if you want to keep it in check, you still have to be in truth. You still have to keep a balance. You got to keep it in balance. See, you got to keep a perspective. Yeah, you could say you the bomb, and all of that. But keeping it in balance, saying, well, you know what? There can always be somebody out there better. Or you could actually acknowledge, okay, this person is better at it. See, the key to keeping it in balance is keeping a perspective and being realistic about where you stand, who you are, what you're doing and everything. Because deep down, you know you having trouble. You ain't the best worker on your job. Deep down, you know you could probably treat your mate better. Deep down, you know you could probably be better at getting mates. Deep down, you know whether or not your job or your business or whatever is really producing the way you want. Deep down, you know all that, but your ego might tell you something else. See, the thing is, but if you facing reality, now this don't mean, let me be clear, this don't mean putting yourself down, say, oh, I'm nothing or something. No, you always something. But just have an idea realistically where you really stand. See, it has to be, you have to balance it. You have to balance to protect the I with dealing with the we. And it's not based off a lie, but if you live in that balance, that's nothing but truth. Like when you deal with people, you'll still, because your ego says, hey, you the shit, you the bomb, I'm protecting you, you still going to be confident enough within yourself to deal with them properly. That's the key thing to understand, within yourself. Because you're like, you know what, I'm a good person, I can do this, and you can still be respectful and everything. And then when somebody does something and, we think what somebody does from the outside is hurting us or something, it's like, well, are they really hurting us? Or are they just existing? Because some people's egos can get messed up because somebody else exists who does something better than them, even though this other person didn't do anything to them. But you have to keep it in balance. So like, yeah, I'm good. Well, you know what? They good too. Keep it in balance. This is the truth, and it's tough. That's the main message of all of it. It's tough. It is tough. It's the toughest thing because there are so many forces, so many people. They try and mess up your ego. And it's tough to stay because you got to stay strong, but you got to stay in balance. And that's where the toughness come in. That's where it's tough. Keeping that balance where it's not under control, but keeping it still intact. So it's just like, wow. It's so much to it, but you can still do it. There's no religion higher than truth. If you walk truth, you can keep your ego in check. The ego's still there, but it's not out of control because you're facing truth. And you say, what is truth? Well, what do you see? What do you see that's not from as much from not a subjective view as possible? I say as much. It's hard to get 100% non-subjective, objective opinion or view or something. But how much is it? Can you calm yourself enough to actually look at something? And it's tough. It's tough, but it can be done. Like the key, focus on balance, focus on truth, okay? All right? And it's still tough. And that goes along with one of those battles within because it can be a fight too. But you can do it. I believe in you. My ego tells me I can deal with it. So anyway, y'all, I want y'all to really think about that, okay? Get back with y'all later. Peace and blessings.